Hello, I am Joel McLeod.
And I'm Roland Tanner.
And welcome to the 905er. For the last year, homelessness in Hamilton has been on the rise. The city has tried to come together to solve it. We've covered it before on the podcast during our episodes about the HATS project, the tiny shelters for homeless people to get off the streets and into safety, getting their footing and getting back into society. For the better part of last year, the City Council hasn't been able to find a suitable location for this project. Any proposed site is met with opposition, and there doesn't seem to be real leadership for the project from the City Council or the Mayor's office. In that time, the issue of homelessness has grown exponentially. Tent encampments are now a feature of public parks and streets. It has grown into a citywide crisis and is now the issue of our time for Hamilton. So where is the mayor to address this humanitarian emergency in her city? Well, that's what we wanted to know. What are Hamilton's plans for addressing homelessness? What resources are available to be used? And where is Andrea Horwath's leadership on this crisis? Those are some of the questions her critics would like answered. One of the most vocal is a longtime friend and guest of the podcast, Laura Babcock. On her weekly online panel, The O Show, she has been bringing up the issue of Mayor Horwath's absence on this file, amongst others. Well over a year into her new mandate as mayor, the priorities of Mayor Horwath are still a mystery to many Hamiltonians. And in that absence, the homeless issue has turned into a crisis. It should be pointed out that not only has Laura been using her platform to criticize Mayor Horwath, but in her personal time, she has been volunteering in Gore Park with the tent encampments to help feed the homeless there. Her unique insight into what is happening on the ground, we believe, makes her a valued guest on this topic. She joins us today.
Hey listeners, I'm Christy.
And I'm Melissa, and this is Buried Motives, where we dig deep into the details of some of the most gruesome
dirtbag murderers. She said she enjoyed hurting things that can't fight back.
Like, if you were only to look at what she did later on and not know any of that history, she would appear like off the wall crazy.
Oh, 100%. She struck him on the back of his head with a frying pan, almost killing him, and was hospitalized for a severely fractured skull.
She fractured his
skull.
Wow. So the movie Tangled was right. Frying
That's
pans
right.
are dangerous.
They are. He feels like he is totally justified in the murder that he commits.
Even after he's convicted, he feels justified.
Oh yeah, to this day.
That's a confident dirtbag right there.
That's right. He believes that his victim had it coming.
Join us each Thursday as we unearth the dirtbags that live among us
and the motives buried there. Hope you join us as we exhume the truth.
Welcome back for the fourth time to the podcast. Friend of the podcast, scourge of conservative trolls everywhere, Laura Babcock, host of the O Show and a CEO, president of the Power Group. Thank you very much, Laura, for coming back to the 905er to take a dive into Hamilton municipal political failures is what I think how we're going to frame this episode.
Hey, I'm glad to be back, and I love that intro, but I would like to think myself as a scourge to trolls everywhere.
Fair enough.
I don't know how you come at me.
Fair enough. One of the reason I want to invite you on to this episode is we've been wanting to talk about return to Hamilton and talk about what's going on in the city, and you've been focusing a lot on the O Show, so we thought who better to talk about it. But Hamilton's homeless issue, I don't want to say it's a problem, I want to say it's an issue, is not going away. Tent encampments have not disappeared well over a year into this new council's term in office. Recently, the Tiny Hats project, it was a complete failure that really could have gone, I think, a lot of steps to mitigate this crisis that we're in. And you really haven't kind of let the current council off the responsibility train. Can you give us some insight into what your thoughts are on the situation at hand?
Well, I think if we're going to use a label for it, it's an emergency, right? We're seeing huge numbers of people living in homelessness in our community, at least 1,600 on the street that we know of, but that doesn't count all of the people who couch surf and who, move from one precarious dwelling to another. And as everybody knows, we have a large food line that happens and a line for clothing and other supplies, which I think in the spring was around 250 people in Gore Park, and now it's 800. We served a couple of weeks ago. It felt like on Saturday there might have been as many as 1,000 people. So we know that there is a huge need in Canada, across Canada. There's over 200,000 homeless people in Canada. But we know that just in Hamilton there's a lot. In Toronto there's 10,000. I mean, it is unimaginable to see those lines. It reminded me the first time that an Osho viewer sent me the photo of a Depression-era soup line, and I couldn't believe it. And so since being able to volunteer, I've gotten a much better sense of just the depth and the breadth of the crisis, and met a whole lot of people who are living in homelessness. And they're there for many reasons, right? Rent control was taken away. So a lot of people are being rent evicted. Their apartments that they could live in sort of managed poverty for years. Now you've got seniors who are being kicked out on the street because Ford removed rent control. It's just a fact. And a lot of people are also dealing with disabilities, and we know that ODSP payments are way below what anybody could manage on, right? So it's and we know that the federal government, the prioritization around housing stocks just hasn't been there for the last 30 years. Subsequent governments have failed to project the numbers that we would have and the need that we would have for deeply affordable and affordable housing. So, it's on this issue, it's not about a particular political party. This issue is about all levels of government not doing enough, and particularly to Hamilton Council. You're right. I don't know if you've seen the Osho I just posted, but I went at Councillor Cameron Kretsch for a good 45 minutes. I don't think either of us came up for air. And I called out Council's failure to get the HATS project done. And it wasn't just that, they spent 2 years kind of theater around it, death by delay, as I called it. But then when the site was finally selected by council and they finally went ahead with the pilot program, it was in Cameron Kretsch's ward. He went down to tell the community about this pilot, and there was huge pushback. The mayor and him were bullied. They were getting death threats. And so what ended up happening is council was crickets. No one on council stood up and said, this is our urgent priority. We've said there's an emergency here. We have said that affordable housing is our priority, and getting these shelters done has been decided finally. And so we are not going to accept this kind of nonsense. We are going to make sure that people in our community have access to shelter and housing. There was no sign of solidarity or courage. And, when Councillor Kretsch tried to tell me last night that, there was these technical issues, I said to him, with all due respect, because I know he's someone who's been fighting for the tiny shelter project, I said, other municipalities, I'm getting things sent to me all the time from across Canada, updates on their tiny housing projects, right? Got one from BC the other day on the mayor updating when they're going to have theirs up. I mean, other communities right across the country, I could go on and on with this, are finding ways to temporarily help people. Ottawa worked out a deal to use vacant building. In Hamilton, there's a group pushing for the armories to at least temporarily be open. So we're in a situation where I don't think any of us can let our eye off the ball on this. Now, it is symptomatic of the bigger problem, of course, of a lack of housing availability and a lack of mental health supports and food prices and all the rest of it. It's a complex issue, and what leads people into homelessness is complex. Getting them out is possible. It just requires a transition to housing. We know that Housing First is the solution. Finland's proved it. There's lots we can do, but we're never going to see less encampments, guys. And a baby was born at an encampment this week, right? We heard about it. So, I mean, we're never going to see, the baby was born a couple months ago, but one of the counselors finally admitted it this week. We're never going to see less people living in these terribly dangerous conditions. They warm up their tents with hand sanitizer, which causes fires, which can kill them, right? There's a lot of dangerous drugs on the street. And if I was living outside in the winter in Canada, I'd probably be using something. So, I mean, sorry to go on so much, but it's a huge issue, but we have to address it.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to address there, and we're going to go over it in this episode. I think what I want to focus on is, you mentioned the failure of our political leadership. And yes, I think every level of government has some share that pie to bear. But I want to focus on Hamilton because my take is that the failure is now turning into a matter of all levels of government looking to each other and say, oh, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, so therefore we can't do X, Y, and Z. Therefore, it's really your fault. No, it's your fault, da, 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 da. And I'm going to pick on Hamilton City Council because I thought, let's bring it back to that FATS project. That was a very simple solution to say, well, at least we're doing something. We're taking the steps. It's not the end-all solution, but it is a powerful step forward and kind of light the fire underneath the province and the feds to say, we're doing our part, step up. Now it's your failure. Mm-hmm. Why are we not seeing that level of leadership? I mean, from Andrea Horwath in this council, the fact that, as you said, Andrea Horwath and Cameron Crutch goes to the community and they're getting pushed back, and there's no leadership to stand up and say, time out. This is what's actually happening. This is what's actually going to take place. Instead, they fold like a cheap suit and say, well, the people didn't want it, therefore we tried, and we're all out of options. Like, we're not at a place where we can say that that's an acceptable move forward. What's your opinion then on this council to say, hey, why can we not get these basic programs underway, executed, and get something on the ground at least that's within their jurisdiction?
So there's I think 3 parts to that. I think we've seen Mayor Horwath advance almost no progressive values or platforms or positions. Mm-hmm. I mean, even right now on the police services board and on LRT and all these other things, she's either absent or delaying votes or, kind of protecting herself from any kind of scrutiny. Whatever that is, that's not what I call leadership. And I think it's been a huge disappointment. So then you have to take her out of the picture, except for the fact that she's, knows how to use parliamentary manipulation things to move votes around. She's doing that well, but she's not standing up for anything, and she hasn't shown that she's going to, and she doesn't speak about these crises. And so it gets to a point where it's kind of like, okay, what is council doing then if the mayor is not someone we can count on to stand up for people, right? And so then we have council, and what the hats thing showed us, Joel, was that and this is what I worried about so much at the time. It was an organized campaign to block that location. There were lawn signs, right? This is not something where 1 or 2 neighbors are worried. And so there were letters being written in public. I mean, there was a lot going on. I found a lot of it terrible, and I questioned some motives behind some of it. But what we saw there was, because it looked like an organized campaign to my seasoned eyes, I was afraid that would be replicated. And now we're seeing it replicated, right? Now we're seeing that council was tasked staff to find a couple of parking lots in the city that were municipally owned, not used very much, near high density, or at least near transit and shops, and a great place for housing. They selected a couple. Before even talking about what the build would look like, you have a group in Stony Creek who are trying to fight back against it, right? And they sent me the petition. It was like, oh, we didn't know about this, blah, 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 blah. We support affordable housing, but not in our backyard, not near Veterans Lane, which, by the way, is just assigned to a back laneway behind the Legion. It's hardly as wonderful as we can do with a Veterans Lane, and I think we should move that sign to a better street. And I took a video for the O Show just to show people what we're fighting over here. What we're fighting over is someone from that group somewhere I heard say, in the North End, they could stop it with hats, right? So and I forgive me if it wasn't a direct group member who made that comment, but I'm pretty sure I saw it somewhere on social, the idea that, well, it could be stopped there, right? The hats program was stopped with opposition, so we should be able to stop it here. Mm-hmm. And then you see other long-term councillors, remaining old guard, saying, well, we want to protect the character of the neighborhoods in our ward. So I think what's happening is you have enough people on council who do not want the character of their neighborhoods or their neighbors to have to accept density and affordable housing, and people in their neighborhood who might not have the same kind of economic status as the rest of them do. And so they're like blocking this on these technicalities with these petitions with these, business groups. And it's going to get worse, guys, if we don't have council, if not the mayor, at least council say, you know what, we are never going to protect the urban boundary and the green belt, if we can't get these houses built or these units built within our existing urban boundary, if we can't use our available parking lots, if we can't put it in places that are already zoned for affordable housing, then we're going to end up having to cut into the green belt. We're not going to be able to do it. So, I mean, it's counterintuitive for people who supported the Greenbelt to be opposing these kind of densifications. And it is politically cynical of some of these councillors to deny their own priorities and to basically kowtow to some vocal residents and even support those vocal residents in their vocal opposition. And they're using kind of the hats example, at least, you know, in terms of a template for how to do it. So as a community, we have to say, either we want to help with our homeless crisis, we want to help with the growing crisis. It's not going to get better before it gets a lot worse. Either we want to do everything we can right now to get some of these affordable housing units built for the sake of the dignity and the survival of the people in our city, or we want to protect our parking lot because we like a store nearby, or we want to use, you know, this sign to say we can't build here, or we want to say the character of the neighborhood, or people are, you know, we're either going to do it or we're not. There's 1,000 reasons, guys, not to do things. You know, but if you have the values and the vision and the urgency to get something done, you get past all those obstacles. You work with partners, you collaborate, you discuss. The mayor should be doing press conferences every day on this, like we see Olivia Chow doing almost every day. You know, she's up there all the time telling the people of Ontario why the budget, why the housing, why the need to press the feds. So, you know, if the mayor's not going to lead this vocally, and Councillor Kretsch on the O Show tried to bifurcate it. He tried to say, well, that's vocal leadership. And I said to him later, like, leadership is leadership. Vocal is part of it, but we haven't seen evidence that there's any special deals happening behind the scenes to open the armories or to open up, you know, Sir John A, or to get the HATS project back on track or get another collaborative partner. Like, we're not seeing the effort that would suggest that this is in fact a priority for this council, and we're certainly not hearing about it from most of them, and that's very alarming.
That's really the character that this council now has, isn't it? I mean, we've been here for a couple of years now. Mayor Horwath isn't you know, the new mayor on the block anymore. We can't kind of say, well, let's wait and see. I mean, I was saying to Joel just before we came online, well, she's delivered exactly what she promised, because she promised nothing and she's delivered nothing. Her kind of campaign literature was some of the most empty I've ever seen in my life, and I've looked at a lot of campaign literature in my time.
Right.
And boy, is she delivering. It's, I mean, as an former leader of the...
Roland, sorry, but some of us, the O Show, when I interviewed her and I saw that it was all pablum and platitudes, I warned everybody. I said, I don't think she's in this to win this for the city. I think she's in it because she can have it, you know, and she won by 1%. So I'm not even sure there's a real mandate there, right? Or there, I mean, you know, democracy, she's the mayor. But I'm just saying that not a lot of people were super inspired by that campaign, like you pointed out.
It was a very uninspired. I mean, like, exactly. I mean, she won unconvincingly, but there you go. That's how the system works. But my goodness, you know, as a former leader of the NDP who sold herself, you know, the firebrand standing up for the little guy against, you know, those rotten guys from the other two parties. This is what we can expect as a mayor. You know, what would we expect it as a premier? This is so disappointing, isn't it? And I mean, I'm the first person to say, you know, the job of mayor in an Ontario municipality is a sucky job. You've got no power. You got very little power. The power that you do have is really to use your voice to kind of embarrass other people into action in some ways, but you do have that voice and you have that platform. And like you say, people like Olivia Chow managed to use it. Marianne Mead Ward, whatever her faults that many of our listeners may feel she may have, she's someone who, you know, has stamped a character on a municipality.
Former Mississauga Mayor Bonnie Crombie as well.
Yeah, Rob Burton, people like that who have, you know, their mayoralty is love them or loathe them, have a character. Patrick Brown even, yeah.
The mayor of Guelph has been hugely vocal around housing issues, right? So, I mean, there's a lot of them who are using social media and using their bully pulpit.
I mean, she's so incredibly absent, it seems to me, and not using the admittedly limited power that she has.
Well, she has
to
the
kind
mayor
of,
superpower, but she has the strong
well,
mayor
that's
power.
true, isn't it? Yeah, I'm forgetting that. Yeah.
She's
Yeah, of
not even
course.
using that. I mean, and I get this asked all the times. I had lunch with somebody the other day and it broke my heart because it broke their heart. It was somebody who got into politics because of Andrea Horwath way back in the day when she was that firebrand, scrapper. And they said to me over lunch, they said, like, I'm heartbroken. Like, what is happening? And they said, is she compromised? And I thought, I don't want to assume that. I don't want to ever throw that out there. I don't have any facts. I do think it's important to look at who funded her campaign, though, and who went to fundraisers for her subsequently. What are the names on there? I know some of the names on there are former conservative rivals from Queen's Park, are developers who, I think they have their names in the Greenbelt stuff. So, I mean, we have to look at who got her into office. And I think that matters, right? It matters. It's not definitive, but I think it might help explain some of the slow to get on board with the Greenbelt. You guys remember, I think we talked about this last year. It was like, why isn't she at the rally? She wasn't even at the one at City Hall where Mayor Mead was. The Burlington mayor came to our City Hall and our mayor didn't show up. I mean, it was weird. And then finally, when we won the Greenbelt thing from a public pressure point of view, she was happy to sign a big letter of how proud she was of council standing up to Ford on the Greenbelt. But I mean, with issue after issue after issue, I mean, she campaigned on the LRT to be union run or operated. And I think there was an LRT meeting yesterday. And at the end of all these delegations, she kicked the vote to down the road so that when it comes up in the next voting thing, if she votes pro-union, it'll probably still fail. But she didn't make the decision when it would have, I think, really mattered. I wasn't at the meeting, but that's the assessment someone gave. So and the police service board, she wasn't there when the budget came up. And then when the budget came to the second meeting, she told Councillor Kretsch that a budget meeting wasn't the place to review the budget line by line, right? And then the meeting this week, the chair, they were putting forward a possible election to the leadership to change it up of a racialized candidate for vice chair and Crouch for chair, and Andrea Horwath voted against them and kept the status quo. I mean, there's example after example, guys, where it's not just Mayor Absentia, as people are calling her now. It's the fact that when she's there, the votes they're hard to understand from the lens of what many of us thought were her values. And so I'm not sure.
And if you think, I mean, again, I almost feel like, given that she sort of dropped into the race, almost sort of weeks before, she wasn't part of the discussions in Hamilton that were going on for years before, where, you were having shows, we were having shows, about the talk about the need for a new type of mayoralty, a new type of council. She wasn't even here to see that. And what she seems to have delivered is is there anything Andrea Horwath has done in a substantial way that couldn't have been done by her predecessor? I mean, because I can't think of anything. I mean, what makes her stand out as a new broom? There is no new broom, even a little bit.
There's no new broom, but what was alarming to me at the time, but I didn't, I just didn't think it would be this bad. I thought she wouldn't work as hard as Keenan would because he had a clear campaign and vision. But I thought that with all of her experience, she would use the bully pulpit well. She would go at Ford. She would get our fair share. She'd scrap for Hamilton. I wasn't as concerned when this happened. But when she got the endorsement of the old school mayor, two of them, and an old guard councillor, like some people who we had serious concerns with, from a progressive point of view and from a scandal point of view in this town, took their endorsements with a big smile. And I thought, wow, she must just really be out of touch with what's been going on in Hamilton if she thinks that's probably lost her votes, right? People are looking at that going, how can we just got rid of Fred and Sam and these guys. It took a lot of work to try to get this council to a place that it could meet the needs of the 21st century, right? Mm-hmm. And here you are doing what? Taking their hand off. So to your point, Roland, it feels like the baton was passed. And the problem is, let's take the New Year's levy as an example. The mayor of Halifax canceled their New Year's levy because he couldn't sleep at night, knowing that there were homeless people near the city hall, and he was going to spend $8,500 of taxpayer dollars to throw, these stupid parties. He cancels it, gets council to move the money to a charity or whatever that would help the homeless. Mayor Andrea Horwath threw three of them. And we said to her, like, you can stop this, right? Like, you don't have to go forward and do this. Not a peep, not a sense of any kind of, so I don't know if it's a gut instinct. I don't know if she's got certain people who got her elected and she's not going to do anything that, that's off what the script is. I don't know what's going on, but I do know that there's another column in the Spectator today from Margaret Skimba, who's a regular Osho guest. I haven't read it yet, but I've had a number of people send it to me and I'll look at it later. But asking, where is Mayor Andrea Horwath on the important issues? So, where's Waldo? Where's Andrea? For a long time, we couldn't even find her. And now when we do see her vote, we don't understand. And that's troubling because we've got another, 2.5 years of this?
Well, I kind of want to bring it back to the issue at hand. And I think it does play into it a bit. And because anyone who follows your social media has seen that you and your family have been going to volunteer on the front lines, literally the front lines of this crisis. And you've got a chance to meet some of the people that are directly involved with this. And I thought that was interesting because we seem to see this abandonment by Andrea Horwath at the municipal level to get to be the people's mayor, these people. The other issue is a comment that Doug Ford made when he was asked about the homeless issue in Hamilton. And he made a comment that basically like, oh no, we're creating all these jobs and, we're going to have all these, they just need to go out and get a job. And it struck me as like, it's this old tired belief in that homelessness is your fault. It's because you're lazy and you don't want to work. And that's why you're homeless. And therefore you deserve your lot in life. And as you said at the start, it's not there's a myriad of reasons why this is happening to folks.
Yeah.
And I just kind of want to get your commentary on that. Is that, at its core, it was feeling this kind of apathy towards the homelessness crisis that's happening in our cities. Is it that we're still stuck in this 1980 thinking of you did this to yourself and I'm not bailing you out because,
right.
Just get out of my park kind of mentality.
So I think, so yes, I do. I mean, the organization that runs it is not political in any way. So when I speak about what I experienced volunteering, it's not, I'm not representing them. I get to meet so many people, and now I look forward to it every Saturday, and I'm hoping that I see the same people. I mean, I hope they made it, right? Another week. There's so many reasons, right? And I think what I've seen from research, even from other municipalities, is that there really are now seniors who wouldn't have been homeless before because they would have been in these low rent apartments that they could manage on a fixed income, who are now rent evicted and on the street. There really are. It's true, right? There really are babies being born, and Cameron Croach confirmed yesterday, it's not the first one, of children in Canada being born in tents, right? In precarious situations. I mean, it's hard to imagine this is happening. And so when I meet people and I get to talk to them a lot, there are a lot of people who, one guy said to me this week, he goes, I feel bad taking this from you because until recently I was paying into the system with my job. And I said, you're not taking anything. I'm happy to share. We all need support sometimes. There are people who had a personal tragedy, went into a depression. There are people who had and don't have mental health supports, who found their life kind of getting more and more difficult. There are people who, there was one student who was there who didn't have, we've heard a lot about students who come over and had no idea that there wouldn't be affordable housing and there wouldn't be affordable food, right? And two gentlemen who are homeless, one in a wheelchair, said, we've found him and we're bringing him through the line. We don't want to take anything today. We want him to get it because we want him to know that people in Canada are caring. Can you imagine that, right? And we had, I've had situations where people told me that they don't have any heat in their apartments, and so they sit by the stove. I've had, there's so many reasons why they're there, but a whole bunch of it. And what I keep hearing about when we get into these conversations is that one guy said he cries every time he tries to go to the grocery store. Other people have said like they used to be able to live together in apartments and they can't, and one guy a young man, he must have been like seemed like 22 years old, had an older gentleman with him who's maybe 40 or something. And he said, I was too shy when I first became homeless to ask for help. But now that I've learned how to, I brought my friend. And the friend said, isn't that what life's about? Is paying it forward. So, I mean, these are people who are living right now in sleeping bags and in tents and in terrible situations. And they have incredible dignity and graciousness and compassion and generosity of spirit. I mean, I see people who are hungry, who are, when a little child keeps wanting more and more and more, and they've gone past the limit. I think everybody kind of wants kids to have a little extra, but when it's like, we really can't, we've got a lineup of, 800 people behind you, we can't, you'll see other people in line go, no, they can have my portion. I don't need from that table today. So, I mean, and a lot of them dance. I started bringing dance music because I'm a dancer. So I dance on the corner at my little table, or if I'm cooking the food, bringing the food out, and people start dancing. Some people don't speak English, and they find that dancing is a way that we can communicate. So it's a place of joy in the sense that people down there are wonderful and grateful and just trying to get through the day, and they appreciate the support from the community, which is massive. It's an incredible operation. But you can't go down there and meet people and walk away with that 1980s idea that you're talking about. Well, just pick up your bootstraps. I mean, how do you pick up your bootstraps? One young, beautiful woman I saw down there was an amputee and must have been in her 20s. And she said to me, is that this kind of pasta? And I said, oh, I'm not really sure. And she goes, well, it doesn't matter. It's all wonderful. And I thought, how does she get through the week? Like, I can't understand, right? And you have people, one guy said to me, I'm a dancer, but since my body is now broken, I'm dancing with you in my mind. And you're sitting there going, that is beautiful and heartbreaking. And so if you have an injury that literally you couldn't work if you wanted to, which I think most of them do, like, who doesn't prefer to work than not work? There's not an ODSP doesn't even come close to paying rent now. It's not even just checking between rent and food. You can't have either, right? So I think we just have to and I'm no hero for going down there. I really enjoy it. So does my family. We have a great time. The organizers who run it are the heroes, and who cook the food. It's amazing. We're just there to lend a little bit of our time on Saturdays. But the experience changes you guys, because you, as someone said, it changes you on a cellular level. You just can't believe those narratives and those excuses anymore. It's like, no, these are, could be my friend, my neighbor, my cousin. Like, what on earth, right?
I want to ask just this one follow-up question. Since your time volunteering there, have you seen any political leadership show up to talk to the people there, to volunteer, to get a lay of the land of what's happening on the streets of Hamilton, at any level, federal, provincial, municipal?
I made a commitment that I would not politicize the tremendous effort done by 130 volunteers every Saturday. I can't answer that, Joel. I've been asked by other interviews. Mm-hmm. Not only might I miss them because I am focused on the people in the line, not on, who else is there, but also, people have to search their own heart and decide where they can be most helpful, right? What I know is that they're missing out if they're not there, because it is a beautiful experience, and it is just the scale of the operation. You've got convoys of vehicles coming in from, dropping off food. You've got the coordination is incredible. And it must be a full-time job for a number of people who do it for free all week to make it happen. And if I were in elected office at any level, and there was a volunteer operation that was doing that much, that well, I would want to watch it just from a logistics best practice point of view, let alone get to know the people who are there, So I don't know. I don't know if they ever have been. I don't know if they are. I don't look for them. What I look at is the person in front of me and ask them how they're doing and what I can get for them, right?
Well, I like the notion of a convoy that helps.
Yeah.
It makes a change in the Canadian context. Yeah. I mean, bringing it back to the public opposition to the Hats project. I mean, my feeling always is with sort of NIMBYism, mm-hmm. as it is called, is that NIMBYism is a constant in life. People don't like change. And when someone proposes a change in a neighborhood, you will get people who say, I don't want it. And as a councillor, or as a politician at any level, you just have to expect that. So I'm not going to criticize people for being people, Sometimes those the reasons people oppose things are incredibly small-minded, narrow, and petty. Sometimes they have an actual point. The fact is that opposition is going to be there. They have a right to have their say. However, the duty is on the politicians to stand up to that if they feel that it's unreasonable opposition. If it is just small-minded, not in my backyardism, it's the leadership that then turns the tide. Use your political capital to say, hey, we're not going to give in to these people who say this, because this is a really good project. It's a good project because of this, this, and this. And we didn't get that from the mayor. But it sounds like, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're obviously much more deeply in tune with what's going on in the council than I am. Didn't really come from anywhere else either on council. I mean, I know Councillor Kretsch, it sounds like, still would have been well behind the project, and you certainly would expect him to be. But this just seems to have died. The first sign of opposition, it just went.
Well, it's coming back.
Well, let's give up.
Yeah, well, it's coming back, and I think that Councillor Danko and Councillor Nan and others are supportive of this kind of affordable housing build. Because you can't. I mean, unless you're looking at it from a purely pandering point of view to your hyper local constituency for your re-election or your peace of mind or whatever. Unless you're looking at it from that point of view, like Tom Jackson talking about the character of the neighborhood or whatever, like unless you're that person, you have to know this has to happen. Otherwise, the Greenbelt gets expanded into, right? Like it has to happen. And so to override the knowledge that that's both a council priority, it's urgent, and it has to happen to protect the Greenbelt, to override that by hyper local opposition around really technicalities that don't stand the test, I think that's shameful. And I think that that's where, when this comes back to council, I'm very much hoping that the majority of council will say, you know what, it's going to happen in each of our wards, no doubt about it. And we're all going to have to stand up for the bigger picture for the city. And we're going to have to get this stuff done. And so what we did on the O Show, and I don't normally go to this much of a length, gentlemen, as you know, is I just drove down there and I thought, what is this venerable veterans lane that I haven't even heard of before and I haven't seen? My family were veterans. I'd love to see this thing. And I couldn't find it because it's right behind the entrance to a municipal parking lot sign. And it's a laneway behind a restaurant and the Legion. And I thought, if people are using the honor of veterans to stop this affordable housing project, first of all, I can't imagine the veterans would stop it. As someone said to me, like, isn't that what they fought for a Canada that's compassionate and everyone does well? You know what I mean? But also, can't we do more for them than that? I mean, if we want to have a veterans lane, can't we do much more than the entrance to a municipal parking lot and a lane and like a back lane? So, when I saw that, I was kind of shocked. And I thought, it sounds compelling, but when you really look at it, there's definite things we can do. And Councillor Kretsch brought some of them up on the O Show. But then when you actually look at the parking lots and you look at how busy or not busy they were, you look at how perfectly located they are, there's other buildings around it. You have to start to say, is it because it's affordable housing that's the issue? I mean, because parking is not that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, right? You're bringing the wrong kind of people into our neighborhood. You're going to affect our It's all the classic stuff. And again, that's so predictable. You can't be a councillor and not expect that you're going to get that. Of course, right,
but they've managed not to do it for so long. Well, and you know why? Because every time, in my experience, there has been a higher level priority for the city, right? Whether it was LRT, whether it was whatever, it always falls apart in these little fiefdoms that have been established and entrenched, and that's why we fought so hard to change that up. But there's enough left over, right? There's still 2 old guard councillors plus, someone who was placed by an old guard councillor who won the election but was supported by one. I mean, and you got a mayor who's acting like, old guard mayor. There's enough there that can play that game of saying, well, I don't want that my voters are going to be mad when it comes to us. So if I vote for this now, I'm going to be called out then, so I'll support this guy over here in blocking it from his neighborhood because he'll help me when I need to block it from mine. And we both get reelected. I mean, that's that's what it comes down to, right?
I guess what it just comes down to me is that this seems to me is Andrea's issue. Is the homelessness in Hamilton is her, whether she wants it or not, this is her file. This is what LRT was the previous mayor's fight. Homelessness in Hamilton is now hers. She doesn't get to opt out of it.
Well said.
But I think what it comes down to is we saw that she didn't have a vision or an idea of what Hamilton was going to be like 4 years after her term. And I mean, I'm editorializing here, but this is what it comes down to is like when you don't have a vision for the city, you can't enforce change. You can't direct it. You can't say, this is a priority. I need to scratch this off the to-do list. Pass project done. Affordable housing done. Okay, let's get back on track to economic development or LRT, whatever the case is, right? The fact that the council's just spinning its wheels. Like, my question is, why is Cameron Kretsch, a counselor, the one spearheading this cause? Like, this really should be the mayor. It should be just saying like, yeah, we can do this. Council, get on board, do it or not, and make it happen.
I don't know, but I'll tell you, when a number of people that I had had on the O show as potential new counselors that I was impressed by, and all of them got in, I was excited on that night, right, when we saw the turnover of council. But I actually jumped for joy when I heard that Cameron won, and by a landslide, because I knew Cameron quite well. And he, as a volunteer, remember, as a volunteer, had been sanctioned by the city, had been disparaged, and the community raised $22,000 in 24 hours for his legal fight against the city as a volunteer. So that wasn't going to be somebody who's going to roll into council and accept the status quo and go along to get along, right? And so he is a standout in that way. And it's hard. It is hard to have a team that you're part of and have to constantly call out, bad plays. That's not easy to do, but that's what he got elected for. And so far he's doing it. I'm not happy with every single thing he's ever done, but I am happy that he can come on my show and get, effectively yelled at for 45 minutes like I did yesterday and take it, right? Because he agrees. I mean, I think on a lot of levels, he agrees that there has to be more done. And he said at one point in the show, we need council. I hear you. We need to be more vocal. We need to be more united. We need to fight this fight. And you said it so brilliantly there, Joel. She can't opt out of this. This is the crisis of our time. It wasn't the crisis of Fred 0.1, Fred 2.0. It wasn't the crisis of Bob Bertina. That was LRT, right? That was other things. Bob Morrow's crisis was industry leaving. Larry Diani's crisis was, trying to create the Renaissance and fix downtown and the Lister block. I mean, they all had their crisis. They all had their focal point that they were judged on and that they had to fight hard battles. We have Mayor Andrea Horwath not fighting the battle. And it's not just about whether or not you think people deserve to be in homelessness, or why aren't they taking, migrant labor jobs, or why aren't they doing this, or why aren't they doing all these things I hear all day long, or too much immigration, or all this other stuff. It's not about that. It's about right now, you want our downtown core to be successful and businesses to be successful. Guess what people won't feel comfortable being around is other people who are in crisis, right? So how do all the restaurants that I've supported for so many years, how do all the businesses that I've supported as a chamber member and a former chamber director for so many years, I've had the BIA as a client. I mean, how do they get the kind of foot traffic and the kind of renaissance of the downtown that we were starting if we are now under this post-pandemic rent control spurned inflation era crisis? They're not, right? It doesn't feel safe downtown. It does not feel safe. And that I hate, it breaks my heart to say that. And it's not the fault of the people who are living rough. It's the fault of our governments for not providing adequate shelter and health services for people who are now in dire situations and are living. I try to understand what it must feel like Truly. I mean, one guy said to me, he goes, he's living on the street on Bay Street. He said, I could smell the food from Bay Street, which is several, kilometers away. And he made his way all the way over. There are people in encampments who can't leave their encampment or leave their corners for fear of what might happen to what they have, right? So people can't even access the help sometimes. And so, I mean, it's just, I think to myself, after this 2 or 3 hours of like support and joy and love, and it's mutual. After that, how do you get through the next week? Like, sleeping in a sleeping bag in a doorway right on Main Street. I mean, how is that life? And it's heartbreaking. And I know it's hard for men and women. When I see some of the women who are living like that, I can't possibly imagine the exploitation that they might be going through. We cry after when we come home every week. At least I do. Sometimes my daughter does. Because we have to not unsee it. We don't want to forget it. We want to do everything we can to fight for them. But I don't know how I would manage that. And I think anyone who is going to judge them for the state they're in or the choices they make to survive the night, I mean, boy, wow, meet them and then see if you would ever want your brother or your child or your sister or your cousin or someone from high school that you knew possibly trying to survive the next 7 nights in downtown Hamilton on your own. I mean, that is pretty dire, and it's pretty scary.
I heard, and I can't remember the person's name. He's used this phrase, but it was a poverty eradication activist a few years ago, whose name may come back to me, who said, and it stuck with me, poverty and by implication homelessness only exists because we are willing to let it exist, because it's a price we're willing to take. It's our choice. Yeah, it's a choice we have taken and that societies have taken for decades and centuries. And when we decide we want to reduce it, it reduces. And when we decide we don't care, it goes back up. We can get rid of this. It's well within our power, but it's never a priority. Excuse my phone.
May I just say on Poland, are you familiar with what Prince William has done? He made a pledge that in the UK in the next 5 years, homelessness will become infrequent and unrepeated, or something like that. I forget his words, but basically there are these organizations all throughout the UK that are using best practices, right, around homelessness and how to he didn't say eradicate it, because as you said, it's as old as time, but he did say, like, to make it infrequent and short, as opposed to what we're accepting now, which is chronic homelessness, which is saying, you know what, too bad. I get to have a home and heat, and I get to work in a heated city hall with washrooms and everything that sit empty all night long, and those people get to lay out there and freeze and take dangerous street drugs to get through the pain or to stay awake and alert, right? Which is what part of it is. I get to have this, and they don't. And I'm telling you, there are families in those lines. There are little children, right, who are helping their adults to come and get the food. And when you see them, you think, I want everything in my being to communicate that I want them to have an image of joy and people sharing and people caring and people laughing and dancing. Like, I don't want them to ever feel like they were somehow lesser than in our society, but we are treating them like they are. The 5 richest people in the world doubled their net value during the pandemic, right? So there's plenty of money to go around. It's not that there's not enough money for the poor. It's that there's never enough to satiate the rich. There's never enough greed. There's never enough to fill that level of greed and that level of power, right? So we have the money. We have it locally. We have options. We don't need to throw 3 New Year's parties. We don't need to.
And the pity of it is, and I know we should draw a close here now, but I can't resist throwing another brickbat at the mayor. The pity of it is, she has the opportunity to really stamp her name on Hamilton forever by being that NDP firebrand, by being that person who will not accept the status quo, to not be another conservative boring conservative small C, whatever C, mayor who just accepts the crummy way that things go in municipal politics. Like you say, she's a strong mayor now. She can really tackle this if she wanted to be the person she always told us that she was.
Wouldn't that be wonderful? I mean, for all of the op-eds that I've written, and I wrote one just for Christmas that says we need a quarterback, not a cheerleader. I mean, we're at the point where we need, there's the best analogy.
Either would be nice.
yeah, seriously. A cheerleader for that issue, as opposed to, all the other announcements if you look at her Twitter feed. So it's not that she's not talking and posting, it's that she's just posting happy news announcements as though somehow we can Pollyanna our way through this mess, right? We can't. So I would love it, in spite of all the critique that I've had to do over the last year of her mayoralship. I would love it if tomorrow she woke up and she spent the day talking to every other mayor across the country who's figured this out, and talks to her $1 million worth of staff and says, you know what? This is something that we are going to tackle. We are going to, I would call an emergency meeting of the council. I would do a full, weekend strategy. They spent $30,000 10 years ago on coming up with the best place to raise a child over a weekend. They can certainly spend the time talking about a full scale approach to the homeless crisis. And yes, they've had staff come back with reports, but the winter strategy that staff came back with the next day, all the advocates in the city did an emergency press conference saying that it was dangerously under whelming or whatever. So, I mean, they could do more. But if she, to your point, Roland, if she stood up tomorrow and said, my legacy as mayor, which is what the mayor of Los Angeles did, who hasn't even been in the job as long as Mayor Horwath, said, my legacy as mayor will be to tackle the issue of our time, which is homelessness. We're going to do it in a multifaceted way. We're going to communicate about it every single day in one way or another. This city will be updated on all of our progress, all of our missteps, all of our challenges, and we together will lift Hamilton into, as she always says, the best years are ahead of us. Well, let's get there, because we're not going to get there just by her saying the best years are ahead of us. What about these years? What about the people who are freezing right now? Right? We need the best years to be now, and we need you to get to work on it. So if she just copied the mayor of Los Angeles, I'm sure the mayor of LA would take her call, mayor to mayor. They're both new mayors, relatively speaking. Talk to her, or just look at her Meet the Press interview where she described her entire strategic, multifaceted plan. It may not work, it may work, but at least she said, I will be judged. Her exact words, I think, were the mayor of Los Angeles, I will be judged on how I deal with this homelessness crisis. Does Mayor Horwath even think that's hers, to your point, Joel, that's her issue, that she can't walk away from it? Or does she think she can just turn a blind eye? I don't know.
Well, I guess time will tell on that. But thank you, Laura, for taking the time from your schedule to come on and talk about this issue that will not go away, despite how much Mayor Horwath would want it to be.
Like I said, I'm not here on behalf of the Gore Park Outreach. I don't do PR or anything for them. I just tell my stories from my experience. But I do get, after every time I talk about this or post one of the stories, like I posted one of Mohammed, who's came from Dubai 9 years ago, and he's a volunteer and he's so wonderful. I mean, people love to hear those stories about, or Anne, who cooks hundreds of meals and gets up at 2 a.m. There's all these great stories. So if people want to find out if or how they can help, then they reach out to Gore Park Outreach. And they can talk to them. So like I said, I don't represent them, but I know I'll get emails and tweets after this asking how people can help, because the outpouring has been amazing. And so that's where people can go if they want to help in some way.
And you know what? I think we'll maybe try and see if we can find an email to put in the show notes for people to reach out if they're so inclined. But thank you very much, Laura, for coming on today, and all the best.
Okay, before too long, got to get you back on the O Show. You guys haven't done the reciprocal yet. We got to do it.
Send us the invite. We'll make it happen one way or the other.
Well, actually, you know what? I'd love to have you on the next one if you guys are available.
Okay. Yeah,
I think this topic needs to go on the O Show. I'd love the discussion to be on the other side with you guys.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Right. I'll send you an invite. Okay, guys.
Fantastic. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
I'm Matt Kundle, host of the Sound Off Podcast, the show about podcast and broadcast. Since 2016, we've been speaking with amazing people who have populated your ears for decades. Legendary broadcasters, research wizards, talent experts, podcasters, voice talent. Almost 400 stories, all for free. Subscribe or follow the Sound Off Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or at soundoffpodcast.com.
that's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
Looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.